In a speech at Davos last week, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney never mentioned President Trump by name. But he rebuked his trade wars as coercion, and he suggested the U.S. has created a rupture in the world order. We spoke with the outgoing Canadian ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, on Friday. Take a listen.
We're not in the middle of a divorce, but we are in the middle of a change. There's no question about it. I think that we are finding ourselves, quite frankly, in a situation where some of the foundations that have governed our relationship for a long time, that, integrated supply chains are good, that working together on strategic issues are important, that looking out for each other in important ways is a number one priority. I think in some quarters, Canadians feel that those foundations are being tested. We will adapt. We will make it through. I have no doubt about that. But it's a complicated time.
You have had a long career here in the United States, deeply involved with trade in particular. You helped to negotiate that free trade deal known as USMCA during the first Trump administration.
Yes.
President Trump was asked about it January 13th. He said, "I really don't care in terms of renewing it. There's no real advantage. We don't need Canada products here." Is that free trade deal doomed?
No, it is not doomed. That is my view. All three countries, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, did broad consultations, national consultations with their business communities in particular on how that agreement works for them. And really, without exception, the American comments back were, sure, we'd like to maybe update this or change this a little bit. Mm-hmm. But job number one is to do no harm to this agreement, which is the economic foundation of our continental partnership and leads to very important U.S. competitiveness and Canadian and Mexican competitiveness vis-a-vis other parts of this world. So I think that we have to believe that our political leaders are going to be listening to the people and the constituencies for whom that instrument was drawn up. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, this is vital to us, do no harm.
Because you heard the Commerce Secretary say at Davos, globalism isn't working. I mean, these free trade deals are part of that globalism. And it was just a week ago, your prime minister was in Beijing, and he described Canada's relationship with China as more predictable than its relationship with the United States. He really meant more predictable than the Trump administration's United States.
Look, there's no question that the last number of months have been unpredictable for us in our relationship with the United States. We have a trade agreement that had us virtually tariff-free between our two countries, and now we have very serious tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, lumber, and that's causing a lot of challenges within our country. There are people that are losing their jobs, there are industries that are being reoriented, and it's very difficult. So that is seen as, yes, unpredictable.
But Fortress North America had been an idea. I mean, the Treasury Secretary talked about it, that the United States, Mexico, Canada, we could stand up together, have shared values and stand up to China. That seems dead if Canada is really describing a new alliance here with Beijing.
Well, I think we have to put this in perspective. The agreement that we did with China a few weeks ago was a very focused and surgical agreement that was largely or almost exclusively designed to de-escalate some tariff escalation that had happened over the past year and a bit. So over the past year and a bit, China had put very punitive tariffs on Canadian agricultural products and fish and seafood, shutting Canadians out from one of their primary markets, if not for some of them their primary market. Mm-hmm. And so we went to Beijing to reestablish market access for our farmers and our fishers. It's exactly what the U.S. administration did in October when they reestablished market access for U.S. soy farmers, mm-hmm. and in exchange rolled back some tariffs and fees. So this is a very pragmatic, very focused approach. I think it's important to put it in context.
I want to ask you what your prime minister said at Davos. He got a standing ovation for this speech. He described a ruptured global order, the end of a nice story, and the beginning of a new brutal reality, which he described as a predatory one. Take a listen.
Stop invoking rules-based international order as though it still functions as advertised. Call it what it is, a system of intensifying great power rivalry where the most powerful pursue their interests using economic integration as coercion.
He said, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. What does this new world order look like?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think he laid out in his discussion, his speech, his view of what is happening in our world. And it's a world in which rules that governed every player in the globe, every country, were maybe not perfectly abided by, as he said, maybe not always exactly exercised as one would hope, but still were sufficient to form the basis of the prosperity, the stability, the predictability that we all used to maximize peace and stability and maximize economic reality. So we're moving away, or economic benefits, and we're moving away from that. And we have to, countries like ours have to figure out what that means for us. I think that what it does mean for us is that we can't walk away from our principles. We can't walk away from our belief in rules that are to be abided by everyone if they commit to them. But at the same time, we have to be pragmatic, and we have to look inward to control what we can within our own economies, to be as resilient as we possibly can within our own economies. And part of that means engaging pragmatically with a broad array of countries around the world in trade agreements, in investment relationships, and in partnerships.
President Trump posted on social media that Canada is against the Golden Dome over Greenland and has voted against it to choose to be closer to China. Yet, President Trump had previously talked about Canada participating in this Golden Dome project, which isn't yet built, but it's supposed to be layered missile defense, as I understand it. Do you know what he's talking about, that Canada has rejected being involved?
I'm afraid I don't. But what I can say about the Golden Dome is this: Canada is investing over $80 billion over the next 5 years in our defense systems. And a big part of that is Arctic defense. And a big part of our Arctic defense investments are something called over-the-horizon radar, which is a system that allows us to see the threats that are coming into the Arctic before they arrive. So that is part, and when we have talked to the president about protecting our hemisphere, we have talked about ways in which our different capabilities can work together so that we have eyes on the region and we cooperate in a way that protects both of our countries.
So the president has described that as Canada wanting to plug in to the system. As you understand it, that's the better description, your own system that would coordinate?
Right. Much as we do across all sorts of defense systems where we're interoperable, we work together, we make our investments that make sense for Canada in defending our territory and defending our sovereignty, but we work with the Americans and other allies to maximize the benefits of those.
So in short, you do think there needs to be more focus on Arctic defense, but you're on board to help do that.
We're deeply committed to Arctic defense, absolutely.
I need to ask you about NATO because you're also a partner at NATO.
Yes.
The only time that NATO's Article 5 was ever invoked, and you know this, was after the 9/11 attacks on this country. That collective defense clause, an attack on one is an attack on all, meant that Europe and Canada, they sent troops right alongside American troops on the battlefield in Afghanistan. Here's what President Trump said.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little off the front lines.
He was speaking about all NATO troops, but we did check, and about 40,000 Canadians deployed to Afghanistan between 2001 and 2014. 158 were killed, 635 wounded in action. What does a remark like that do to people at home?
You know, I think what's most important is that we know what our Canadians have done. And I know that your American armed forces are deeply respectful and deeply appreciative of having stood side by side with Canadians in those very, very treacherous and difficult fights. We know that to be true. They know that to be true. And that's what matters.
You can see the full interview with the ambassador on our website or on our YouTube channel. We'll be right back.